This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Wednesday, February 26th. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, it may have been the roughest Democratic presidential debate yet, with candidates going after frontrunner Bernie Sanders and each other. We're going to show you how their attacks and concerns ahead of Saturday's crucial South Carolina primary unfolds. Israel will also be holding its own election, the third in less than a year. That will happen on Monday. We're going to take a look at what may be the future of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Defense Department requesting a massive $700 billion for its next budget in the name of military readiness. We're going to explain why they need so much money to carry out their mission. And revival in Tennessee, we're going to bring you a first-hand look at how God moved people in people's lives when churches came together for 30 days of prayer and fasting. We've got all those stories and much more ahead in this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour with what may have been the most contentious Democratic presidential debate yet, as the candidates took aim at the frontrunner, socialist Bernie Sanders, last night in Charleston, South Carolina.
Thinks that Donald Trump should be president of the United States, and that's why Russia is helping you get elected, so you'll lose to him.
Bernie and I both want to see universal health care, but Bernie's plan doesn't explain how to get there, doesn't show how we're going to get enough allies into it, and doesn't show enough about how we're going to pay for it.
If you think the last 4 years has been chaotic, divisive, toxic, exhausting, imagine spending the better part of 2020 with Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump.
I'm hearing my name mentioned a little bit tonight. I will tell you, Pete, what the American people want, and Joe, what the American people want. They don't want candidates to be running to billionaires for huge amounts of funding.
And speaking of billionaires, Senator Elizabeth Warren once again took on former New York City Mayor, multi-billionaire Michael Bloomberg.
At least I didn't have a boss who said to me, kill it, the way that Mayor Bloomberg
never
is alleged
said
to
that.
have said to one of his pregnant employees.
The candidates went at each other repeatedly, talking over each other, trying to get time to speak. It prompted this warning from Senator Amy Klobuchar.
If we spend the next 4 months tearing our party apart, we're going to watch Donald Trump spend the next 4 years tearing our country apart.
Look. In the end, South Carolina voters will have their say in this Saturday's primary, a primary that's considered a must-win for former Vice President Joe Biden. Then next week, the huge Super Tuesday primaries, and the Democratic candidates and many in the party establishment are hoping they can stop Sanders before he effectively clinches the Democratic nomination. And after another election will soon be held in Israel. It is the third election in a year. It will be held Monday, just 5 days away. And while voters there have plenty of concerns about their own issues, they're also keeping a wary eye on U.S. politics. Many Democrats have taken a hostile tone toward the current Israeli government. They're led by frontrunner Bernie Sanders, who blasted Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during Tuesday's debate.
But what I happen to believe is that right now, sadly, tragically, in Israel, through Bibi Netanyahu, you have a reactionary racist who is now running that country. And I happen to believe that what our foreign policy in the Mideast should be about is absolutely protecting the independence and security of Israel. But you cannot ignore the suffering of the Palestinian people.
CBN News senior editor John Wagi joins us now from Jerusalem, where he's been following both the U.S. and Israeli election campaigns. So, John, how are Bernie Sanders' comments likely going to go down with voters in Israel?
Well, the short answer is not well, Efrem. You can imagine that if an Israeli politician were to level that sort of charge at President of the United States, there wouldn't be a lot of Americans happy. I think the fact that it came just 5 days before the election is really dangerous, and it's most troublesome for the left here in Israel, because they've got to weather this barrage by Bernie. Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, came out and called the comments horrifying. That's not something that you hear from a high-level Israeli official very often, commenting on an American political candidate. In fact, they tend to stay away from that, and they really would prefer that American candidates do the same with Israel, other than indicating support for the country as a whole. I think it really could have a potential backlash effect at the polls, not that Israelis focus totally on the U.S. election, but to the extent that Bernie Sanders used such harsh terms to describe Israel's prime minister, the longest-serving prime minister, by the way, in Israel's history. Sanders may have forgotten that in the heat of the debate.
Benjamin Netanyahu seems to be making a comeback as the election draws closer. What's happening there with the polls, and why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, it's interesting, Ephraim. The last 4 polls, and they've all been held within the last 4 or 5 days, show that Netanyahu's Likud party has moved ahead of the Blue and White party. Now, that's significant because Blue and White has held the lead ever since Israelis found out they were going to have a third election in December. So for nearly 2 months, or a little more than 2 months, Blue and White had the lead, and now they've relinquished it, in their view, probably just at the wrong time. And I think that Netanyahu has been running a fairly positive campaign this election season compared to some others where he worried about Arab voters turning out in huge numbers just trying to get him out of office. And this time he's focusing more on getting Likud voters who stayed at home because they were dispirited in the last couple of elections. He's trying to get them back to the polls this time. And comments like Bernie Sanders just made may just get them to the polls, and he may have a surge here in the last 5 days.
We'll be watching for sure. How is President Trump's Middle East peace plan factoring into the race?
Well, it's interesting there because Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, went to Washington, supports the plan. His main rival, Benny Gantz, also supports it. But the problem with Gantz is many people in his coalition don't support it. So they're more in favor of the Oslo process of ongoing negotiations without giving Israel the chance to annex what many Jews believe is their biblical right to the land. So Netanyahu is going ahead with plans for mapping the area, for eventually bringing it under Israeli control. Not doing it right now because the Trump administration asked that he not annex formally those lands now, but they're important to Israel's security. And so it's helping Netanyahu on balance, I think, and it may be part of the reason that he's having this run up in the polls.
Netanyahu does face a court date just 2 weeks after the elections. How might that affect what happens Monday?
Well, it could affect it, but, you know, there may be weariness on the part of the Israeli electorate. Voters know that he's under indictment. He's relinquished his immunity from prosecution. He does have to make an appearance. Many of his supporters think that the charges against him are bogus, that he'll eventually be declared innocent, and they may just go ahead and vote for him, and others may vote for him just because by a 12-point margin they'd prefer Netanyahu to Gantz as prime minister. And that's the whole Israeli electorate, not just Likud voters. So it's interesting that even though he's got this court date facing him, and also Gantz has some court problems of his own right now, that it could work in Netanyahu's benefit.
CBN News senior editor John Wagi speaking to us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much. Now back here at home, the Centers for Disease Control is warning Americans to prepare for the spread of the coronavirus in this country. And they're also warning it could lead to severe disruptions. This comes as the virus is still spreading in various nations, including Italy and South Korea. Iran has raised its death toll to 19, and the deputy health minister seen in this video looked sick in a press conference. He tested positive for the new virus. Here in the U.S., this 3M factory in South Dakota is making masks and respirators that can help protect people from the disease, but they can't keep up with the demand. President Donald Trump says the U.S. is doing everything it can.
Very well under control in our country. We have very few people with it. The people are getting better. They're all getting better.
It is likely even more will be done here in the United States and around the world in the days ahead. Coming up, the Pentagon wants a lot of money in its upcoming defense budget, $700 billion. But why do they need it? We're going to hear the answer to that question when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
The Pentagon is asking for a staggering $700 billion for defense in its next budget. While that may seem astronomical, experts say much of it is needed to ensure military readiness. It is a term you often hear, but what does that really mean? Here's CBN News' national security correspondent Eric Phillips to explain.
Basically, it means exactly what it says, always being ready to defend our nation. And that came into question recently when Defense Secretary Mark Esper wanted to move money from military projects to help build the southern border wall. The resulting uproar was not political. It was concern that the military would not get what it needed to do its job.
Readiness means you are ready to carry out your assignment and fight on behalf of the nation immediately.
A Navy veteran of nearly 28 years, Rear Admiral Craig Quigley now leads the Hampton Roads Military and Federal Facilities Alliance. He says military readiness must be an ongoing priority.
If you're a pilot, you are proficient at flying your aircraft. If you're a ship or a submarine, it is well maintained. You have a well-trained crew. If it's a land unit, they know how to fight together, to maneuver together. It is maintenance, it is training, it is spare parts, it is not very sexy.
I'm here at Naval Station Norfolk, the largest Navy base in the world. Dozens of military ships like this one call this port home, and some 42,000 people show up to work here each and every day, supporting a Navy that is second to none in the world. And they plan to keep it that way. They stay on ready.
It is a discriminator that America's military is very ready to fight tomorrow, and that sets us apart on the world stage.
And that takes money.
We have invested a record-breaking $2.2 trillion in the United States military.
Still, the need for new equipment tends to eclipse the budget.
We have had 20 years of hard use of equipment that was purchased in the 80s and the 90s. You have a balancing act that you need to do to maintain what you have and still pay for a recapitalization of the force.
He says by and large, U.S. military leaders have been able to strike that balance while being relentlessly ready.
You wouldn't want it any other way. It's incredibly important.
Quigley adds it's not only important for U.S. forces to be ready, but for our allies as well. He says that's why the president has been pushing NATO countries to meet their commitments to spend at least 2% of their nation's GDP on defense. In Washington, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Still ahead, it's a movie straight out of the news. The Ku Klux Klan raises an orphan who grows up and falls in love with a woman who demands that he leaves and change his racist ways. Well, you'll see what happens after that when we come back. Stay with us.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to CBN Newswatch. We want to turn now to what's new at the box office this week. And there's a film ripped from the pages of real-life headlines. Here's the story. The KKK raises an orphan who grows up and then falls in love with a woman who pushes him to change his racist ways. The Klan comes after him, seeking revenge. He finds help, friendship, and comfort in a black preacher. Studio 5 has your first look at Burden.
This is a movie that I wrote it 20 years ago. It's not a reaction to anything. You know, it's just a beautiful story about overcoming hatred and bigotry through love, faith, and acceptance.
The weapons that we use to fight fear, they're not brutality, they're not wrath, they're not hate. They are and will always be love.
It's the story about a man, Mike Burden. He ends up falling in love, essentially for the first time. Is given a choice between love or to leave the Klan.
Done a lot of bad things in my life. Things I now regret.
If you truly want to leave the Klan, and your first step is admitting what you've done.
He meets a reverend that sort of shows him a new direction in a way, a new choice in life. How to love, how to respect, how to forgive.
We're in the midst of an epidemic right here in Lawrence.
Reverend Kennedy is a protest minister in the South, and he meets Mike Burden, and he recognizes that this person, or Mike, has this door that's opening maybe. If he's able to like walk by his own problems, the Reverend is able to walk by his own prejudice and stuff.
Can't get rid of hate. Let's replace it with something else.
I felt like this was something significant, and I felt like I wanted to be a part of telling a story like this. Even in the character, I felt like there's a journey for him. Every character specifically has a journey of their own.
Am I understanding that you would like a room for that man? You know who that man is?
I know him as a brother in Christ.
And Reverend.
We are in the midst of having the same issues of hate, and what are you going to choose to do? Are you going to choose to be that, or are you going to be the person that changes that?
I've been praying for some kind of sign. If this ain't a sign, then I don't know what is.
How did you let that man in this house?
It's a pure test of whether or not he can love somebody who was his enemy, and through that love be able to move that person and himself to become more full human beings.
I ain't no Klansman no more.
You don't lead a Klan, Daddy. It's in you.
They may set crosses burning in the middle of the night, but we will fill the night with a different kind of fire.
Burden is in theaters this Friday. We do caution you that it's rated R because of the seriousness of some of its content. You can find more stories of faith and entertainment on Studio 5. We are paying tribute to the life of Katherine Johnson this week. She is the Black NASA mathematician whose story is told in the film Hidden Figures, and she died this week at the age of 101. Now you can catch the full show, all of Studio 5, on the CBN News Channel. It begins tonight at 9:30 Eastern. Coming up, churches in Tennessee came together for fasting and prayer for 30 days, and the Spirit of God came leading people to salvation, rededication, and baptism as the movement touched 100,000 people. We're going to have a first-hand account when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
Revival has taken place in Tennessee over the past month as 1,000 churches from various denominations partnered for 30 days of prayer and fasting. It was called Awaken Tennessee, and pastors reported the response was powerful and the Spirit of God led people to salvations, rededications, and baptisms. It's estimated more than 100,000 people were touched by the time it ended on Sunday. East Rogersville Baptist Church was the launching pad. The church pastor told the Rogersville Review newspaper the Holy Spirit came and took control. Before the events ended, George Thomas spoke with Barbie Franklin of Awaken Tennessee about how God moved in these services.
So tell us, how is God changing people's lives in these services?
Well, God is moving tremendously right here at East Rogersville Baptist and really all across Rogersville, Tennessee. A lot of churches have been involved in these services. Basically, it began with, I believe, a fasting movement. We saw in Nashville, Tennessee last year, a leader, a young, humble pastor, start a 30-day fast. and 400 churches joined him. And we took packets across the state. They are prayer packets that help people to pray for the residents of their city and neighbors. And basically this year, more churches wanted to participate. So there are literally well over 1,000 churches now participating this year in this 30-day fast. And because of what we have seen in other nations, we particularly saw in the nation of Egypt back in 2010 and 11 that really stirred up revival there and spread across their nation and now across the Middle East, with millions of Muslims getting saved.
You mentioned this before, but it all started, as you said, with this commitment to praying for 30 days. Tell us about that real quickly.
400 churches ended up participating, and a bunch of leaders that we introduced to this movement across Tennessee participated last year. And then this year, what we saw was that all the churches that had already heard about it really wanted to join and participate as well this year. And so we have well over 1,000 churches that are fasting and praying right now across Tennessee. And about a week into this fast, a few weeks ago, we had been invited to this church, and they had revival meetings scheduled already. And as soon as the service began and the worship began, it was such a beautiful experience to see people running to the altar with no invitation. And that's a sign of revival.
Do you think this could help lead to nationwide revival in America?
I absolutely believe it could, if the people of God will press into Him in prayer. It always takes pressing into God and pursuing Him. And it absolutely could inspire another great awakening.
Terrific. Thank you so much. There is nothing like the power and the glory of a transformed life in Jesus Christ. Barbie Franklin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
As we come to the end of this show, I'd like to leave you with a word for your Wednesday, and that word is restoration. Know this: God has the ability to restore anything you think you've lost. And in His returning it, He promises it will be even better than it was. With that word, make today a wonderful Wednesday, and be sure to have a fabulous rest of the week. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Email us. The address is there on your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And, of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're there as well. We would love to hear from you. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a wonderful Wednesday. We'll see you right back here same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.